Well, hello everyone again, and welcome back to SPED 266. And we are in week 3. A couple more to go here, guys. We're halfway through. So, today's lesson is going to be on how to basically humanize the IEP, especially the language. As we talked about last week, IEPs are full of jargon that everyday humans don't know or understand, and we want to make sure that our parents thoroughly understand the IEP and its process that goes along with it. So today it's not about memorizing the laws. It's something a little bit more difficult. It's about understanding how important it is and how we can make the complex language accessible to our parents and even our students. We need to be able to explain it to real families and actually help them to get through the process. So why this matters? Families have legal rights, right? The IEP is a legal binding document that gives their students specific rights, specific services in order for them to achieve their academic goals. Most families do not understand these rights. You have taken classes on this. You have been able to get in the mud of it. And so you have a better understanding of what the IEP consists of and what you're legally required to do. Parents don't have that same training. At least most of them don't. And so teachers are often going to be the bridge from what the legal jargon is to the actual implementation and the parents' understanding of that. So as I said, the problem is it is dense, it is technical, and it can be extremely intimidating. I have been in IEPs where it's a 150-page document. I'm like, it's dropped on the table. I'm like, okay, let's get into it. If you've read even one page of federal education law, you understand it's not written for actual humans. It's not even written for teachers. It's not written for educators. It is written for lawyers. And so when we hand these families these legal documents, we can't expect them to understand it. We are setting them up for a really intense struggle when we do that. So we want to break it down for them. So you've gone over it a million times in your classes, but just the quick anchor, IDEA serves and supports, and FERPA is information and access. Both matter, and they overlap more than you think. And we're going to cut into that. Per your reading, it's got crosswalk between IDEA and FERPA and what we can discuss with our parents and with other service members. So in that article you read, it's a crosswalk that aligns IDEA and FERPA. It's going to clarify those overlaps for you, and it's going to explain how rights interact with one another. The crosswalk exists because these laws don't live separately from each other or from real life, but they collide, especially in meetings, documents, emails, and decision making. So one of the key overlaps that the article talks about was access to records. Families have the right to inspect their records, review the records, and request copies of their IEPs or any other school documents. Families can basically see everything you write about their child. So nothing is just for the school. And I want to make sure I emphasize that. I have been in due process, and it is, I like to joke, it's very similar to a colonoscopy. It is all in your business, and they go over everything. So you need to remember nothing is private. It will be accessed, especially in a court of law. So make sure that you are conscientious of that when you are writing emails to coworkers, to service plans, you're communicating with parents. Just be aware that access to records is in the rights of the family. Another overlapping item for the reading was consent. Schools must get permission to share information with anybody and get consent for evaluations. That permission can be for a step parent that doesn't have academic guardianship of the student. It could be grandma, it could be grandpa, it could be a doctor. Permission has to be given in order to share information with anybody besides the parent. And you have to get consent for evaluations. This in the assessment class. Any assessment that you have to take, formal assessment that you have to give, parents need to be notified and they need to give their consent. You don't get to move forward just because it's what you think is right or what you think is best. Families must be informed and they have to agree on everything. The next big concept of the article was confidentiality. Schools are required to protect student information and limit who can access it. Obviously very similar to communication. You cannot casually share student information, not in the hallways, not in email, not with just anyone. Amendment of records was another also key overlap. Families can request corrections to IEPs or changes. They can challenge inaccurate information. So if they're in an IEP and we're like, oh, little Billy is performing below grade level, they can be like, whoa, I want that reassessed. I want us to relook at that. Or if we think a service is too much, parents can say, I don't agree with that. I think they need more, and I'm going to challenge that, and I want reassessment. So they have the right to amend or change the record or request for it to be changed. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be changed, but they can request for those changes to be made. If the parent thinks something is wrong in the file, they can push back, and they should push back, and you should encourage them to push back. And it needs to be taken seriously. And so the focus of your assignment this week is taking all of this legal information and making it accessible for our parents. So knowing this information doesn't mean you know how to explain this information, right? You can understand every law perfectly and still completely fail a family if you can't explain it clearly. And that is what the importance of this week is we want you to take all of these legal jargons and put it into everyday language so that any human can understand it, whether they are a lawyer or they are a stay-at-home mom. We want this information to be clear and concise for absolutely everybody. So the first thing you need to do is figure out what families actually need to know. They don't need to know legal citations. They don't need to know the policy language. They don't need to know those things. But what they do need to know is the clear explanations, practical meanings, and what does this mean for me? What does all of this mean for me and my child? So your role here, you are not the lawyer. You are a translator, you are the bridge, and you are a guide. You need to move from I understand this to I can explain to someone else how to understand this. Can someone explain this because of me, right? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. Parents have the right to inspect educational records under FERPA, right? That's a confusing statement. They don't know what FERPA is. They don't know what necessarily educational records consist of. What you could explain differently is you have the right to see your child's school records at any time. If you want a copy, you can ask the school and they must provide it for you, right? So changing how we explain things allows parents to fully understand what their rights are. We also need to consider, like we did last week, that cultural responsiveness, right? This is not generic. How we're explaining is not generic. You are writing and telling people this for a specific family with real context, right? So you need to consider the language that they use, the tone of your voice, their family background, the trust level that you have, right? You need to consider all of those things when you are explaining to families how the IEP process works. And final takeaways. If a family cannot understand what you wrote, you're not doing a good enough job explaining it. And you probably don't understand it well enough yourself, right? In order to explain something in different ways and different contexts, you have to thoroughly understand the information that you have, right? So if you are struggling with communicating to parents what their rights are, that means you need to go back and re-understand it yourself. Your job is not to sound smart. That's not your job, right? You have the letters behind your name. We all know you're smart. Your job is to make families feel informed, confident, and included in the process. So for your assignment this week, we really want you to focus on making this information accessible to your parents, making it so that they not only understand it, but they feel confident going into these IEP meetings. They don't need to bring an advocate because you've been their advocate. They don't need to bring their lawyers because you have informed them of what their rights are and they feel confident in those rights, right? When parents are confused or they don't understand things, that's when they're going to start bringing in a team of people into their IEPs. And that's what we want to avoid. We don't need all of that, right? That's not what's best for the child. What's best for the child is that the parents can make an informed, confident decision because you have provided them with the resources and the materials to understand what's going on in those meetings. So I hope you guys crush this assignment. We're looking forward to reading them. Thanks so much. Short little lecture today, but make sure you get the readings done. Make sure you do your quizzes and enjoy the rest of your week.